Welcome to Renewable New Mexico. It's a program about the people and companies that make our state an epicenter for renewable energy innovation. My name is Sean Wells and I'm your host. And today's title is Passive Solar Innovation, and we are very pleased to have our special guests, Steve and Holly Baer of Zomeworks, a pioneering solar company here in New Mexico. Steve and Holly, thank you so much for joining us. Let's start off, what brought you originally to New Mexico?
Well, it was the best place to go, yeah. We came here in '65, yeah.
Why is that? Why is it the best place?
Well, it was the best place.
It was.
I don't know what it was, but it was, and New Mexico was so informal and friendly, absolutely the opposite of Zurich, where we had been living, huh? Yeah, you know, they wanted you to pass your driver's test. And we hadn't been like that in Europe, yeah.
Now, how did you two meet?
Well, we met, you know, we met a long time ago. Well, Jesus, back in we were, you know, 10 or 12 years old, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
9.
Wow, that's incredible. Did you always have an interest in renewable energy, or did that come later?
Well, you know, my dad, my parents built a more or less passive solar house in the late 40s. This is not a new thing. You know, this was embraced by Americans in the 1940s and earlier than that, yeah. This has been around a long time.
Well, can you tell me more about his structure? I can't believe there was something going on in the 40s.
You can't?
Well, I can.
Well, then you need to learn
but
about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm here to learn.
Well,
what kinds of things was he implementing at that time?
Well, you know, people were using passive solar a long time ago. Mm-hmm. They're just recently abandoning it, you know, because we don't use skylights anymore. We build photovoltaic power plants and leave the buildings dark. That's how our understanding has changed.
Mm-hmm.
So your house was?
Well, our house had mostly lots of south glass and a slab floor.
Mm-hmm. And what was it that motivated him to embrace renewable energy or passive solar? It sounds
well,
like
what else would you do? I mean, if you're alert, that's what you do. Yeah, you use nature. Yeah.
It's just obvious, isn't it?
Well, I think so. Yeah.
Holly, what was your first interest in renewable energy?
Hard question to answer. I mean, I grew up mostly on a ranch, and I knew Steve and I knew their house, but I don't know that I thought of it as renewable energy. But after we came to New Mexico, having been in Europe for a few years, Steve was really interested, and he started building our house. And so having lived in it all this time, I know what it's like not to have fans and motors. I know what it's like to be comfortable. I know what it's like to have low utility bills.
And
it's simple.
There's a natural connection between growing up on a ranch. It seems like there's a lot of natural, sustainable design that happens on a ranch, people that are ranch-minded.
And I just think you're used to working.
Yeah.
Living with the weather and the situation.
Who would you say influenced you the most? Who were your mentors?
Well, if I had a mentor, it would be Harold Hay, the crazy old man who did the Skytherm systems. But I also, you know, corresponded for decades with Bill Shercliffe, a New England solar guy.
And what sort of, well, we actually should back up. You all are part of Zomeworks. Can we talk about Zomeworks and what it is and what it means to you?
Well, I think Holly should do that because I had to resign from this stroke some years ago, and she's running the place now. Yeah.
Can you tell us what Zomeworks is for someone who doesn't know?
Well, see, now we're discussing who should tell. It was really, it began when we first came to New Mexico, very early on. Steve started building structures, and he was interested in heating and cooling, and he made some air collectors he did, and he began looking at things, kind of inventing new ways to do things. And a friend suggested that he start a business, and started the business.
And you were behind him.
Well, I was in the house. It started in the house, but I was taking care of the kids, and I was there. I was present.
And what was the business?
Well, the business was Zomeworks.
I mean, what did they produce?
Oh, well, first they were structures. Steve can explain them better, but they're geometric structures, which we called zones. And so that's how the name came to be. But then one thing led to another, and we started working with solar.
And what sort of projects that really excite you guys that you've been most passionate about through Zoneworks?
Well, you know, I feel most passionately about what we've had to abandon because the public is being suffering from a scam, you know, because we're building all these power plants, but we're abandoning the traditional uses of the sun. And I mean, this is a word that the public must hear because, like, we're going bankrupt building these power plants, but we're abandoning skylights and daylighting. How do you figure that?
And thermal mass.
You know, I mean, in New Mexico, we solved so many problems by 1980. You know, the trom wall, all these things, and now they're forgotten. And instead, we have a high-tech, you know, power plants, and they're all paid for by subsidies, and there's these government planners are interfering with our economy, and they're just well, it's the 1%, you know, that they're just messing with us.
And I can imagine the deep frustration to feel like
terribly
you've seen these solutions in your hand that are cost-effective, efficient, that make complete logical sense,
and you can't use them, you can't sell them.
them.
People just they don't even see them. They can't see them anymore. The Americans are under a spell.
Well, talk to me more about these solutions. You talked a little bit about the skylight.
Well, we made skylights and we made reflector shades for them that you reflect in winter sun and then you shade the summer. It couldn't be more simple, and I'm sure it's a very old idea, and yet those ideas have been discredited by expensive photovoltaics turning things to electricity.
How about the trom wall? Could you, for someone who doesn't know what a trom wall is, could you?
Well, a trom wall is just a masonry wall with glass in front of it, and they work great. And they worked all through New Mexico, but I don't think that many people are, but there still are some people doing them, yeah.
And what does it do? I mean,
well, it kept the house warm in the wintertime by the heat slowly seeping through the wall.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking about the thermal mass of the wall being absorbed through the glass, and then the glass reflecting that heat back into the house.
Well, we used 55-gallon drums with water in them, yeah, and just a variation on the trom wall.
And that seems like the most cost-effective thing you could do.
Well, it's pretty cost-effective. We still use it, and it works fine. Mm-hmm. But it's not, you know, it's not favored by, you know, by society for some reason. Well, that's what's so strange.
Yeah, it is confusing, isn't it?
Well, you know, I think
I
think our society and economy is terrified of solar energy in its traditional forms because it's so inexpensive and so easy to use that it bumps professionals out of jobs. Just, you know, that's what I think.
But it's a little bit like being afraid of a toddler. It has only good things to offer.
Well, that's what I think. You're right. Yeah.
You've been described to me as a passive solar guru. Do you think that we could get your definition of passive solar?
Well, I think that's a term that a New Mexican, Buck Rogers, came up with for using the sun without motors or you know, adornments or pumps or anything like that. And you know, this is for daylighting, for heating, and you know, we do it for cooling as well.
Well, thank you. We're going to take a quick break with our sponsors, and we'll be right back to continue interviewing Steve and Holly Baer of Zomeworks. Welcome back to Renewable New Mexico. Today's topic is passive solar innovation, and our guests are Steve and Holly Baer of Zomeworks, a pioneering solar company here in New Mexico. Well, let's pick up where we left off. Why do you think that New Mexico has been such a rich resource for renewable energy?
Well, it's sunny. It's very sunny, and that's you know, that's the bottom line. It's sunny.
It certainly helps when you're working with solar technologies to have some sun.
Does, yeah.
Is there, Zomeworks has a motto, low-tech solutions to high-tech problems. What's your favorite example of that?
I would say it's because the passive heating and cooling solves the problems of using a lot of electric power, and you don't need it.
Steve, what's your secret method for successful innovation?
Well, I don't have one, yeah. You know, follow your nose and do what's interesting. Certainly not extensive schooling, that's for sure.
Holly, we know that you stumbled into Zomeworks in an interesting way. Steve, do you think you could tell us the story of how Holly had her influential role in?
Well, you know, she is using her extensive savvy to, you know, like right now we've got all kinds of big industrial jobs that we're hoping to get, and Holly is handling all of this with great savvy, I think. Yeah, and I'll bet we get them. Yeah.
Well, let's go back and because we touched on it in the first half. What are you guys doing at Zomeworks? What are you presently doing?
Well, we're manufacturing a lot of cool cells, and these are industrial cabinets that we sell to the utilities and so on, that passively cool batteries. And we've been doing this for a long time, and we're better and better at it, and that's been a big part of our job. And we also make solar trackers, passive trackers and we sell quite a few of those. Yeah.
So you, when I asked you what your secret was, you said just follow your nose. Is that part of where you're at now with the passive trackers and the cooling cells? That's what interests you?
Well, you know, people, I didn't invent the passive tracker, but I glommed onto it, and the cool cell was specifically requested by an enormously influential guy in Tucson, Billy Cerrito. Many years ago, he knew that he needed that. He told me, and I made one, yeah.
And can you, I don't know anything about cool cells. Who is the client for that?
Well, there are people that use a lot of batteries. And so we sell them to, many of them to Tucson Electric, and we sell a bunch to P&M. And, you know, we sell them all over.
And the purpose of the cool cells is to keep...
It's passive cooling. It's using the ideas of Harold Hay, nighttime radiation, and then we use the special qualities of water, and they work great. Yeah.
I love that. Special qualities of water. What is that? What does water have to give us?
Oh, what doesn't it? You know, our whole lives are built around the special qualities of water. It has a very, it has the maximum density point at 39 degrees Fahrenheit, so it shuts off in the cooling, and it's a very high heat of fusion, so it protects. It just does everything, you know.
It is. It's a universal problem solver. What would you especially like people to know about solar and renewable energy? That's a question for both of you, really. Holly, why don't we start with you? Is there something that you would want your grandchildren? We talked a little bit. You guys are now enjoying being grandparents.
Right.
What would you like them to take away from what you have accomplished with Zomeworks?
The simplicity, the comfort, the longevity of the results of building with, and a lot of it fits in with New Mexico because the adobe walls provide thermal mass, and you need thermal mass to retain heat. And it's quiet. It's a good way to live.
I like that.
It connects you.
It's a good way to live.
Yeah,
it sounds like it's very
outside.
difficult because you guys have considered so many aspects. It's hard to sum it up.
Yeah.
It's really about embracing the entire lifestyle and the entire philosophy if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how about you, Steve? What would you like people to?
Well, I agree with Holly. It's the well, it was discovering that the traditional materials are so perfectly adapted to solar, like the adobe brick. I mean, the old timers, the Indians and their cave dwellings, and the Spanish and the Mexicans. I mean, they did everything a long time ago. Yeah. And you know, I hope we've managed to, you know, to modify it a little bit to the better, but hardly any different.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you guys have an eye to the future, and you often give tours of Zomeworks to high school students?
Yes.
Yeah. And when they're touring the facilities, what kinds of things are you trying to instill in them?
Well, I don't give very many of those tours, only occasionally, but generally we show them the manufacturing shop. A lot of kids have not seen things being built. We take them into one of our buildings, which has no electric power to it except for a battery and a photovoltaic panel. But all the heat is passive, and it's warm in the winter, it's cool in the summer, it's very impressive. They see our trackers, and because we have a lot of our equipment out in the yard.
So you can actually use real life examples of how you're...
show them how things work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you actually, in the manufacturer, you have all the pieces laid out so they can see, you can build your own systems.
They can see the welding, the painting, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit like
all the
when you see a television and you wonder how it works, but there really are just components that don't have to intimidate them.
Yeah.
They can learn these processes. That's wonderful. I would like to hear more about, you touched a little bit about Steve's early work on the structures. Steve, can you tell me a little bit more about those structures, the philosophy and the intent?
You know, I studied the geometry of buildings and, you know, found that maybe there's a whole bunch of buildings that are better suited for us than boxes. You know, I worked with zonahedra and other forms than cubes, and I believe this very certainly that you know, the 120-degree angle is a much more pleasant corner of a room than a 90-degree angle. Who knows what all this means? Yeah.
Well, I love, you seem to be bringing a touch of aesthetic sense there. That's really something that feels right to you, but you seem to be approaching everything else from a practical point of view. So I love that you're integrating. He does seem to have both sides of that, very well balanced.
Yeah, yeah.
The practical and
Yeah.
the ethereal sensibility.
Right.
And those structures did have an aesthetic sense to them.
Well, we live in.
We live in such a structure, yeah.
Yeah.
We live in a cluster of 11, basically 11 garnet crystal shaped.
Oh, that's a beautiful
Zones.
description.
Yeah.
And how do you integrate glazing into those kinds of structures?
By brute force, yeah. You know,
A
more or
crowbar
less. It was more or less by brute force, but you know, we only didn't build enough of them, you know, to really iron out the problems. But you know, our house. Well, Holly fixed it up enormously in the last couple of years, and you know, it's just a wonder, yeah.
Yeah. What's the most important lesson that you took away from that experience of building those original superstructures?
You know, I mean, I am so bigoted against universities and credentials and the professionals. I mean, in a way I'm not, but you know, I'm so skeptical of their accomplishments.
So
And that's, you know, that's the way I am. I like the amateur and the self-educated, on-job training, stuff like that.
yeah, and those are the people that you've surrounded yourself with.
Well, you know, that's a lot of what we've that was New Mexico, by the way. You know, on-job training, no credentials, just do it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that the work that you've done with Zomeworks has actually been a DIY guide for many of the guests that we've actually had on the show. They've actually acknowledged that they were influenced by your work and inspired by it.
Well, the poor things.
But it was a time when people were building their own houses, you know, and I think the mayor of Albuquerque built his own house, and there were, you know, all kinds of people who did. Now there are a lot of rules and regulations. And
It doesn't have to be something strange.
Yeah.
It can be
Yeah.
part of a normal family's intent to
Yeah.
build this kind of home with
Yeah.
a positive intent behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the work that you've done and for inspiring so many other people to pick up the torch and continue your work. And I hope to hear more about what you're doing over there, more exciting stuff.
Well, thank you.
That's our program. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join us next week for another episode of Renewable New Mexico. Until next time, this is Sean Wells reminding you, we are all solar powered.